Good morning, colleagues. Today we're going to be exploring an A standard of work for a Year 9 statistics and probability question focusing on data representation and interpretation, which is looking exclusively at golf scores. It is expected that an A standard student would begin to unpack the question by highlighting the key information within it. This would include identifying the type of data and how many sets of data have been provided, the range of data, and contextual factors that act as a constraint on the data. Part A of the question asks the students to group the data into twos and to draw a subsequent back-to-back histogram. I expect that an A standard student would use a frequency table to best represent the new collection of data. This would be drawn up neatly and accurately using a ruler. The student would clearly identify what the vertical columns represent and would also label the horizontal rows correctly. As the table is completed, errors in the table would be absent and the table would be easy to read. The second part of A is to draw a back-to-back histogram of the data using the previous frequency table. An A standard student will create an accurate scale to reflect what one frequency is represented by on the graph, in this case millimeters for example, and we'll use that scale to begin to draw the x-axis. The x-axis will be clearly drawn and given numerical values from either side of the y-axis. The student will clearly label the x-axis also. The y-axis will be clearly drawn and labelled, ensuring that each score columns are all equal along the y-axis. The bars will be drawn neatly and accurately. Colouring is preferable to show comparison, but not necessary. Both sets of data will be given clear titles, and subsequently the overall graph will be given a title to demonstrate effective communication and justification. Part B of the question asks students to justify why it was appropriate to group the data into the frequency table. An A student would compare both tables and use mathematical reasoning to justify the effectiveness of group data. In a few sentences, the student would justify their reasoning on data representation in a clear and concise manner. Part C requires students to use the information from the histogram to identify on what day scoring was easier. An A standard student would analyse the graph, interpret the information, and make a decision. Again, in a few sentences, I expect the student to communicate their justification as to why they chose a particular day, whereby they can clearly demonstrate their understanding on data interpretation. The final component, Part D, is asking the student to calculate the mean and median for each of the raw data sets to determine whether or not the histogram confirms these figures. An A standard student will summarise the raw data into a new frequency distribution table. They will accurately construct the table to determine the total frequency and sum product for the first data set. It is expected that they will define the mean and provide the mathematical rule to solve the mean using a frequency distribution table. The student will use communication justification to show their steps to find the value of the mean and will round the number appropriately to meet the context of the question. To determine the median, the student will state the rule and identify which numbers in the number set will guide them towards finding that number. I expect that an A standard student will demonstrate their understanding through the use of the cumulative frequency column of the table. They will demonstrate all working out and solve accordingly. Once both values are found for the first set of data, the student will state each value side by side and compare their findings with the histogram. An A standard student will make a decision in response to the question and use their knowledge of data representation and interpretation to support and justify their reasoning. The mathematical statement will be clear, concise, and logical. As there were two sets of data in the question, the student would need to repeat this process again for the next set of data. They will do this accurately and consistently, just as the question before. Across the four components of this question, an A standard student would present their work in a neat and logical pattern that is easy to read and follow their decision making. This would be evident through clearly labelling questions, responses, and pages. This would be also evident in their ability to communicate mathematical ideas which indicate and reflect not only the student's knowledge and understanding of the topic, but also their subsequent ability to transfer their skills into a new context.